Welcome to Talkthrough Walkthrough Episode 2. So yeah, the weekly thing isn't going to happen. Not that anyone's watching anyway, but if you do, it'll likely be once every 2 to 3 weeks, maybe every month or so, rather than weekly. Having an actual job means that it's a little bit harder to set aside the time to do this, mostly just to write up what I want to talk about. So, before I begin to address the topic this week, I do want to mention my reaction to the election, since that was the last topic. If you watched that episode, you probably know I'm obviously disappointed. I hope that I'm wrong about Trump and Vance and they do actually make America great, although I don't necessarily think that their great aligns with my great all that well. Why are you in my base? You're not supposed to come through the base. It doesn't seem to be aggressive. Okay. One of my concerns about it is the topic of this video, actually, and that is education. Education is very important to me because I personally love to learn new things, and I love to gain new information. Half of the videos I watch in my free time are educational or informative in some way or another, and if I could make a career out of just learning things, I totally would. And no, a full-time student is not something I would consider a career. But on a related note, my career that I did choose is very much adjacent to my love of learning things because I chose to be a teacher where I can share what I learned and hopefully inspire some of that fascination and desire to just learn about the world to students. This is one of the reasons Trump's plans for education concerns me, because he recently made a video talking about his plans for education. And in that video, he talked about he wants to end the Department of Education, teachers' unions, and bring religion back to schools. He talked about other things as well, but those are the three things I want to focus on. I don't intend to spend too long in this video dwelling on just Trump's plans, as there are other issues that I want to discuss as well, but I want to address at least these areas first, since it's rather culturally relevant, I guess, is the best way to put it. Obviously, the Department of Education is not perfect, and they have plenty of issues that need to be worked out, but choosing to eliminate the Department of Education in favor of states over federal is not the best decision, in my opinion. One of the big problems we have currently that the Department of Education should be doing a better job of, in my opinion, is the difference in education between different states. Not just necessarily the quality of education, but just the connectivity between different states. As we have free movement between states, changing school systems if your parents move, or crossing state lines and changing school systems even within the same state, can cause a lot of issues with standards not lining up, or just subjects being taught in different orders. Take science, for example. In middle school and the state that I work in, science is taught, or at least in the district that I work in, 6th grade science is earth science, 7th grade is life science, and 8th grade is physical. But different states do that in a different order, and we've had it happen where students move to this state and move to this district and they're 7th or 8th grade, but they've already done the 7th and 8th grade science, and they have to get put in the 6th grade science class, and that's just not the best policy, especially if something like that gets overlooked or not caught right away. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to fix that. And that would just become even more of an issue if there's less of some federal program trying to keep them working together to any degree. Rather than eliminating a federal agency that's job should be at least to improve our education, we should be focusing on taking the good things from states with better education scores and implementing those policies into states with lower education scores. I would rather there be a more nationalized system for education rather than 50 separate systems, as long as the systems run well and not politicized in any way, which that is an issue that the Department of Education does need to work on. One of his other stated goals is to eliminate teacher unions so that bad teachers can be fired at will. And while obviously teachers is not something that anyone wants, destroying teacher unions is not the way to fix that problem. Teacher unions do a lot to make a difficult job worth it, and removing them to just create a situation where teachers are more desperately needed and standards for new hires become even lower. Rather than removing a force that's fighting for teachers to get fair pay, the better way to get better teachers is to make the job more desirable for good teachers. Better pay, benefits, better support from administration, And better training for new teachers would help to encourage good teachers to stay in the job, as well as begin to raise the standards of teachers coming in, so that we have more than just a we need to fill the gap mentality towards hiring. Yeah, the last thing that Trump mentioned that I wanted to bring up was him wanting to bring prayer and religion back into the classroom, and I do think there are some issues with this. The main issue is that school and religion should be separate, just as religion and government should be separate. Religion is useful and a great thing for people in their private lives, but forcing one religion on everyone else is an issue. If the religion they were talking about adding into schools was a course that actually informed people about the different beliefs of different religions, then I'd be more willing to accept it, as information is always useful. But the plan is to bring Christian religion back into school, and that's what makes it an issue. I'm not even against the bringing back prayer thing, as long as it's more of a general reflection time where people can meditate, pray, or do whatever sort of reflection they need that they feel is useful or correlates to what they believe in, rather than forcing somebody to pray in a certain way because that's the way you think is best. Moving on from Trump, I do want to address some issues that the education system has, as I see it, as someone who works in it. Some of the biggest problems I see in education relate to the administration or state's expectations of teachers versus the instructions that they're given, the motivation of students towards education, as well as parents' influence on that motivation. And lastly, the training that new teachers receive and are able to receive to become better teachers. First off, the expectations given to teachers by administrations or state or federal school boards are often just kind of nice sounding phrases or some sort of platitude or statements that work really well on paper, but may not work so well actually in an actual classroom. And oftentimes they can be directly contradicted. Oh shit. Is he dead? No, he's just asleep. Okay. And often can be directly contradicted by different expectations from the exact same group. There's so many of these marmosets, memorists? Okay. I won't dwell on too many examples here because a lot of them are specific and won't make a lot of sense without context. But one of the few that bother me is a lot of the expectations on teachers to teach bell to bell, and yet you should encourage students to work by offering some sort of reward, such as phone time or free time. But of course, if an administrator comes in to the class while you're doing that, they're going to be asking, why aren't you teaching? You're also expected to make sure you have enough material for every student, even those who finish in the first 5 minutes no matter what you give them, as well as the ones who take the entire class period to answer a single question. You're also expected to call home and update parents for good things as well as bad things, which is a great idea. You don't want every call to be a bad call, of course not. But you only have so much time, and often those parents may have given you the wrong number or just won't answer your calls, as well as you only have so much time to be making all those calls, as well as planning and doing any of your meetings and eating lunch all in that extra 50 minutes of your 8-hour day where you don't have students in the classroom. Another one of these expectation issues comes from outside of the school system as well as inside. As a teacher, we know that students are going to learn in different ways, and we know to try different methods if a student doesn't understand the way we initially taught. This is something that's often recommended by our administration, and the great teachers are absolutely fantastic at this. But the issues come when administration also instructs us how they want us to teach certain material. And the public can also see this and assumes that we only teach it in that single way. I'm going to embed a video here I saw on Twitter a few months ago that kind of shows what kind of goes along with what I'm trying to explain here. And in this video, which should be playing in the corner now, you see what's an often ridiculed form of teaching math that's called Common Core math. In the comments of this video, there are tons of people complaining about how the child's method is so slow and time consuming compared to the easy way that the mom uses and the way many of us were taught growing up. But this is a perfect example of changing up something that may have been simple for people, simple for some people, but some students absolutely just can't understand what most people would call the easy way, and Common Core is just a way to basically break it down into smaller steps so that they can see and understand what is happening, and it can be an excellent tool to assist somebody who struggles in math. The issue with both methods is the idea that one is superior than the other, and all students should be taught that way. In my opinion, the ideal method would be to teach the quicker method first. For those that get it, they can move on. For those that don't, we can try other methods. It doesn't make you any stupider to struggle with one method more than another. It just means your mind works in a different way from those who get the other method. I think this would help everyone understand the content taught to them better, and it's a big fundamental problem of our age equals grade level, everyone must learn the same way kind of method of teaching, although it is the easiest and cheapest method of mass teaching, so it's not exactly a surprise we stick with it. Moving on to the motivations of students and their parents, one of the most difficult parts of teaching is getting to encourage students who don't want to learn or to make an effort towards any assignments that they're given. A lot of students will do whatever work is put in front of them. This is the type of student that I was, but most will only partially work on it or write whatever they can just to kind of write whatever they can get away with without putting any thought into the answer, as well as a lot will just not do any work at all. Obviously, as a teacher, you want to try to convince students to try their best on everything, and as cheesy as it sounds, every student is actually capable of passing their classes as long as they put in that effort towards it. Is that enough? One more. Perfect. Okay. So now I got enough to build. The problem is motivation is something that's unique to every individual, and some of those motivation strategies can be contradictory. You try the wrong thing that's worked for some, if not most, of your students, but it turns off that student forever, and they're never going to want to work for you. The ability to identify and use the best motivation strategies is very important, but even if it works for one teacher in one class, it may not work for the same student for another teacher. A little bit tangentially here, but oftentimes some of those materials that get shared about inappropriate or cheesy questions come from this idea of trying to motivate the students, because teachers are trying to use things that these students are already talking about and already interested to try to connect with them. Yeah, I'm sure there are some shitty teachers out there trying to push their ideals, but for the most part, it's teachers trying to connect with the kids, and then it being published and shared by someone who it didn't connect to. I might have bitten off a little more than I could chew here. Oh, come on. Help if I could actually hit it. Percent chance. So. Oh, no! Dang it. I didn't want to defeat it, I wanted to try to catch it. Okay, well, I need to go back and heal up my pals that got injured. At the end of the day, each student just needs to find their own motivation. Sometimes teachers can do that, but they're not the end-all, be-all of motivation. I know some students will never find their motivation from a teacher. I personally never did. I had some great teachers and some bad teachers, but never one who really connected to what my motivation was and pushed me in the way that a lot of people often describe. Largely because I was a student who worked well without the push, but some students who don't work may not get that motivation from their teachers as well, and it needs to come from somewhere else. The most common source of that is from parents or guardians, whoever they look up to outside of school. Parent involvement is one of the most important motivators, and it's one of the most commonly missing pieces for students. And I don't mean like overbearing parenthood or helicopter parenting, however you want to call it, but just some sort of interest or some sort of encouragement for the student to do well in school, and caring about grades more often than just when the report card shows up. Motivation coming from parents or guardians can be much more effective than coming from teachers or other sources. But another big problem with motivation is this perception that we put forth in media all the time and common conversation about how awful public schools are. I'm not here to completely disagree and say that public schools are great, but constantly telling kids about how dangerous, pointless, or just plain bad public schools are, surprisingly makes them actually believe that. And they go to school expecting and perpetuating this idea because, well, public schools already suck, so why should I care? And it creates this positive feedback loop that just makes the schools more like the perception, if not worse. And for those of you I confused, I mean positive in the sense of reinforcing behaviors being presented, not negative, which is more of a stabilizing reinforcement loop, if you're not sure how biological feedback loops work. Pesos. Big guy, I don't need you. Well, I mean, I would love to have you, but I am not going to get you. Public schools absolutely are not perfect and need to be better, but telling kids how bad they are is the worst way to try to do that. The last thing I want to talk about is teacher training. It needs to be done better. As a teacher, we have training courses we go through regularly throughout the school year, typically on those days where teachers go in but not students at the beginning of the semester, of each semester. These can be useful and informative to give new suggestions, teaching methods, classroom management, and other things, but they're also repetitive. They can also be repetitive, not very useful, or just so idealistic they're not going to really work in an actual classroom. Those classes could be improved, obviously, but the hardest part is that there's no time to during the year, because obviously they're running classrooms with students. This corresponds directly with training new teachers, because basically we don't. I mean, obviously there are some trainings through those pre-semester courses, or if they're subbing, talking with other teachers before they enter the classroom, or maybe if they did a college program and did student teaching. But none of these are really a true example of having your own classroom, and typically new teachers are thrown into a room to sink or swim because we needed to fill a gap. There needs to be a better way to train teachers, both through shadowing other teachers, co-teaching, or just being allowed to see a recording of an actual class in progress rather than something that's staged and pre-recorded they often show in some of those training classes. New teachers need more time to actually prepare to run the classroom alone, but unfortunately, teacher budgets make any thorough training really impossible. There's a lot more to say about education and could and need to be formed to improve our education system, but the things I've talked about in this video are the ones that I find to be the biggest problems. And a lot of them boil down to parent inclusion or school budgets. Parent involvement is a major game changer in education, and obviously some parents have to work more than others in order to survive and support their families, and because of that, many of those parents don't necessarily have the same ability, and that's perfectly understandable. And increasing school budgets can allow for better materials, better training, better teachers overall, and improve the quality of life of public schools, rather than trying to focus our education into private schools, which seems to be the more common course right now. Anyway, that's all I have to say about education, so if you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe, and come back for more whenever the next one comes out. Have a good day.